5 shadow states that prove you're a real dark chosen one, not a false light. When I say dark chosen one, what do you feel? Fear? Curiosity? A forbidden thrill? Good. That's exactly where we begin. Because this isn't about wearing white robes and pretending you've transcended all pain. This is about standing at the edge of the abyss and not turning away. This is about the real initiates, the ones who didn't find the light by chasing it, but by becoming so intimate with darkness that they discovered the divine blueprint buried inside it. If you're here, listening, still breathing through this first minute, it means the shadow has already touched you. The question is, have you touched it back? There's a secret that most spiritual people won't admit. Not everyone who claims to be light is pure, and not everyone who walks with shadow is lost. In fact, some of the most powerful beings on earth right now are those who have died inside multiple times only to resurrect themselves with no applause, no validation, no audience. They didn't escape their wounds. They ate their own demons. They didn't bypass the pain. They bled truth into it. These are the real dark chosen ones. They don't wear fake smiles. They don't quote mantras they don't embody. They don't fear the void because they are the void, and they've turned that void into a sacred temple.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
I want to take you through 5 shadow states that mark you as one of them. Not surface-level traits. Not aesthetic darkness. I'm talking about the places your soul has wandered while the world thought you were just going through something. The first shadow state is sacred rage. Not anger thrown like a tantrum. I'm talking about the kind of holy wrath that burns through illusion. The rage you feel when you see injustice, hypocrisy, spiritual manipulation. The kind of rage that makes you want to tear down fake temples because you know what real sacredness feels like in your bones. If you felt that rage not as an ego reaction, but as a soul fire, you're not broken. You're awake. That rage is the guardian of your truth. It is the dragon at the gate of your power. And most false light beings will tell you to suppress it. But real dark chosen ones learn how to wield it like a sword of clarity. The second shadow state is divine isolation. If you've ever felt completely alone, not just physically, but existentially, like no one on this planet could possibly understand the weight you carry, then you've touched this one. Real chosen ones aren't surrounded by crowds. They walk alone through deserts of silence, not because they're unloved, but because they're in training. Silence is where the false light dies. It's where you meet yourself beyond identity. If you've sat in that silence and faced the part of you that questions everything, your purpose, your worth, your sanity, you've already crossed a threshold that many will never dare approach. The darkness of isolation is not a punishment. It's a portal. And when you walk through it, you emerge not just stronger but initiated. The third shadow state is the death of false identity. This one isn't a moment. It's a series of ego deaths that strip away every mask you ever wore to survive. The good person mask, the spiritual teacher mask, the healer mask, the you haven't altogether mask. Gone. One by one they fall. And when they do, you're left naked, raw, undefined, not knowing who you are anymore. That's the point. You're not supposed to know right away. You're supposed to unbecome everything you were programmed to be, so you can remember the part of you that was never programmed. The part that was forged in soul fires before this world even knew your name. But here's where it gets darker. The fourth shadow state is sacred self-destruction. This isn't the kind of destruction that comes from recklessness. It's the conscious decision to break your own illusions, to destroy comfort zones that feel safe but are actually cages. It's the choice to burn the bridge to a version of yourself that can't carry your mission forward. Sometimes that means walking away from people you love. Sometimes it means letting go of everything that made you feel secure. And sometimes it means facing addictions, obsessions, or patterns that have silently ruled your life for years. You don't do this because you hate yourself. You do it because you love your becoming more than your surviving. And in doing so, you become a force so rare, so raw, that the entire field around you begins to shift. Now, let's pause. I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it. What part of you is still holding on because it's afraid of becoming something unrecognizably powerful? What fear is still whispering that if you let go, you'll be too much, too wild, too dangerous? And what if that fear isn't warning you but guarding the gate to your transformation? Because here's the truth: the fifth shadow state is the capacity to hold paradox. Can you hold love and rage in the same breath? Can you grieve and create at the same time? Can you be both divine and deeply flawed, and not use either as an excuse to disconnect from your responsibility to serve? Dark chosen ones don't seek purity. They seek wholeness. They don't need to be seen as good. They need to be true. And truth, real, untamed soul truth, is rarely pretty, but it's always liberating. We're not here to chase light. We're here to integrate the dark, to be the ones who walk through shadow not to escape it, but to retrieve the parts of ourselves that never stopped bleeding inside it. Your pain is not a weakness. Your darkness is not a curse. It's a map, a living, breathing map back to your most primal power. And if you've been walking that path quietly, secretly, wondering if it means you're going the wrong way, hear me now: you're not. You're becoming. The false light teaches you to escape shadow, but the real path, it teaches you to become the architect of it. The path of the abyss walker: why real chosen ones must descend before they rise. There's a sacred truth that most spiritual teachings are too afraid to say out loud. Before the chosen rise, they must descend. Not because they've done something wrong, not because they're lost souls, but because the descent is part of the divine architecture. You don't become a force of awakening by floating above pain. You become it by walking through the fire, barefoot, with your eyes open and your heart still beating. The real dark chosen ones are not those who avoided the abyss. They are the ones who made a home within it, learned its language, and came back with something no one else could bring: soul codes forged in shadow. When I say abyss, I'm not talking about depression, although that can be one of its faces. I'm not just talking about trauma or heartbreak, even though those are doorways into it. I'm talking about the dimension within your own being where everything you thought made you lovable, worthy, important falls away. The abyss is where your illusions go to die. It's where your ego meets the limit of its own control. It's where your soul whispers, "Now we begin." And in that moment, you have a choice: turn back and numb out, or stay and become something eternal. The descent is not a punishment. It's a purification. It strips you of all false light. It reveals the parts of you that were still performing, still pretending, still addicted to being seen a certain way. And the longer you resist the descent, the more chaotic your life becomes. Because the soul will not stop until it is embodied. And embodiment requires depth. It requires you to meet the parts of you that your spiritual ego tried to bypass: the rage, the grief, the shame, the hunger. Not to judge them, not to fix them, but to reclaim them. Because the abyss is not empty. It's full of power. It holds the raw, unfiltered essence of who you are before the world told you who to be. And if you're brave enough to face it without flinching, you begin to see what others can't. You begin to feel time differently. You hear guidance not as words, but as currents in your blood. You dream not in symbols, but in codes. You become a translator of the in-between, a walker of worlds. a channel for frequencies that can only be accessed by those who've died to themselves and risen through presence alone. But let's be real for a moment, this path is brutal. It's lonely. It's often misunderstood even by other spiritual people. You'll be told you're too intense, too dark, too much. You'll lose people. You'll lose identities. You'll lose parts of yourself that once felt like home. And yet, through that sacred unraveling, something magnificent happens. You stop fearing death. Not just physical death, but the death of image, of certainty, of control. And when you stop fearing death, you become free. That's when your real mission begins. Because you can't lead others through their darkness if you haven't survived your own. You can't offer real healing if you're still afraid of your own wounds. You can't speak truth if you're still addicted to being liked. The abyss trains you in all of this. It forges your frequency. It teaches you how to hold paradox, how to see through illusions, how to stand still in storms and command silence without speaking a word. Let me ask you something now, and let it hit deep. What if the very thing you're avoiding, the feeling, the memory, the silence, is actually the initiation your soul has been waiting for? What if the darkness isn't here to destroy you but to crown you? What if you've been walking around with a key to your own liberation this entire time, but you were too afraid to go deep enough to use it? This is the path of the abyss walker. You don't walk it for glory. You don't walk it to be seen. You walk it because you must, because something inside you knows that the only way out is through. And when you emerge, because you don't return as the same person. You return as a living transmission. You return with eyes that see both heaven and hell and name them both sacred. You return with a presence that makes people weep without knowing why, because your presence is encoded with truth beyond words. The world doesn't need more people pretending to be perfect. The world needs people who've met their own darkness and learned how to love from inside it. People who've sat with their own demons and realized that even the demons are longing to be integrated. That's what makes you real. That's what makes you dangerous to the matrix and holy to the soul. So, if life has pulled the rug out from under you, if you're in the void right now, questioning everything, feeling like you've lost all sense of identity, don't panic. You're exactly where you need to be. The descent is the doorway. The abyss is the teacher. And you, dear listener, are the one who was chosen to return with the fire still in your hands. The dark mirror, how shadow reflection reveals your hidden spiritual authority. Most people spend their entire lives running from their reflection, not the one in the mirror, but the energetic mirror of who they really are beneath the masks. The shadow reflection isn't just about what you dislike in others. It's about what you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. And here's the paradox: the more you run from your shadow, the more it runs your life. But when you learn to stand in front of the dark mirror naked, unguarded, fully present, you unlock something that no guru, no book, no ritual can give you. You unlock your spiritual authority, not authority over others, but the kind that radiates from within, unshakable, undeniable. The kind of authority that comes from knowing who you are, even in the dark. The dark chosen ones don't look away from this mirror. They study it. They sit with the parts of themselves that others are too afraid to confront. The jealousy, the manipulation, the ego games, the need to be seen, the craving to be worshipped, the desire to destroy. They don't repress it. They interrogate it. They ask, where did this come from? What wound created this expression? What unmet need is trying to be seen? And in doing so, they do something extraordinary. They reclaim power from the very places most people lose it. You see, every shadow is a guardian of a gift. Anger guards your boundaries. Envy hides your dormant potential. Grief is the echo of love unexpressed. Arrogance is often the mask of untapped brilliance. When you deny these parts, you don't become spiritual, you become fragmented. And fragmented beings are easy to control. But when you integrate these aspects, when you alchemize shadow into wisdom, you become whole. And wholeness is terrifying to systems built on control. Let's be brutally honest, most lightworkers are still unconsciously operating from a known shadow. They preach love but recoil at discomfort. They quote peace but secretly compete for status. They perform healing but avoid their own inner child. And it's not because they're evil, it's because they haven't looked into the dark mirror long enough to see their own face staring back. True spiritual authority begins the moment you stop trying to appear enlightened and start embodying your truth, no matter how messy, raw, or contradictory it may seem. You want to be a real force in this world. Then stop hiding from your shadow. Stop blaming others for triggering you and start asking, what part of me is still unhealed, and attracting this reflection? That's the real work. And it's not glamorous. It doesn't come with followers or praise. It comes with tears, with holy rage, with shaking in the middle of the night as another layer of illusion falls away. But after that storm clears, you stand taller, not because you're better, but because you're truer. When you live from your shadow-integrated self, you no longer seek validation from the outside. You don't need to be liked. You don't care if people misunderstand you. Why? Because you no longer misunderstand yourself. And that creates a field and energy that others can feel. You walk into a room and people sense something ancient, something wild and rooted. They don't know what it is, but their soul recognizes you, because your presence becomes a mirror for their unclaimed power. Let me ask you something that might sting. What part of you are you still trying to hide behind spiritual language? What mask are you still wearing that's keeping you from being dangerously authentic? What would happen really if you let it go? If you dropped the act and just stood in your raw, unfiltered self, shadow and all? Because here's the thing, your authority doesn't come from how much you know. It comes from how deeply you've owned what you know. It comes from how many times you've died and come back. From how many parts of yourself you've confronted and integrated. From how willing you are to speak truth that makes people uncomfortable, because you're no longer afraid of your own discomfort. The dark mirror also reveals your blind spots. It shows you where you still give your power away, where you still perform, where you still lie to yourself. And yes, it's painful, but the pain is sacred. It's the labor pain of a new self being born. And if you avoid it, you stay stuck in spiritual adolescence, powerful in theory, but impotent in embodiment. But if you stay with it, if you keep choosing truth over comfort, something miraculous happens. The mirror begins to reflect not just your shadow, but your radiance. Not the fake light of performance, but the deep, ancient fire that has survived lifetimes. The fire that knows how to build worlds, break spells, and ripple truth through the collective unconscious. That's when you become a spiritual authority, not because you say you are, but because everyone around you feels it. You stop speaking from ego and start speaking from the soul. Your words carry weight. Your silence becomes medicine. Your mere presence begins to shift rooms, not by force, but by frequency. So if you've been wondering why life keeps showing you pain, why people reflect your darkest traits back at you, why you feel like you're constantly being tested, it's not punishment. It's initiation. The mirror is calling. It's time to stop looking away. It's time to see yourself fully. And in doing so, finally reclaim the spiritual authority that was yours all along. The final trial, how to transcend false light and rise as an integrated master of shadow and spirit. There comes a moment on every real spiritual path that separates the wanderers from the warriors, the seekers from the seers, the pretenders from the sacred architects of reality. That moment is what I call the final trial. It doesn't come with a warning. It doesn't arrive with angels or fireworks. It comes in silence, in stillness, in the inescapable confrontation between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. This trial is not about becoming more light, it's about finally transcending the addiction to it. It's about stepping out of the performance of purity and standing fully, completely in your integrated wholeness. The final trial is brutal because it strips away the last illusions, the spiritual ego, the savior complex, the need to ascend as an escape from embodiment. It calls out every place where you've used light to mask your fear of darkness. It exposes the part of you that loves being seen as wise, as powerful, as good. And it asks, can you let that die? Can you let the identity of the awakened one fall away and just be real? Can you stop climbing the ladder of status and surrender to the spiral of becoming? This is where most turn back. This is where the false light clings hardest because it's seductive. It tells you to stay comfortable, to keep speaking in love and light cliches, to keep teaching what you haven't embodied, to keep playing the role because it gives you something: admiration, income, belonging. But the final trial doesn't care about any of that. It says, you came to earth to be whole, not holy. You came to be true, not worshipped. And here's the paradox: when you let go of trying to be enlightened, you become free. When you stop trying to be above it all, you finally become of use to the world. Because the truth is, the world doesn't need more people floating in false transcendence. The world needs grounded mystics, embodied truth-tellers, warriors of presence. And you don't get there by bypassing the mud, you get there by planting your roots in it and growing anyway. This is what it means to be a master of both shadow and spirit. You don't reject either. You don't idolize either. You integrate both. You recognize that your pain was never the enemy, it was the portal. That your darkness was never filth, it was fertile ground for awakening. That your flaws are not failures, they are fingerprints of your soul's unique curriculum. You stop trying to fix yourself, and instead, you fuse with yourself. You stop trying to escape your humanity, and instead, infuse it with divinity. Let me ask you something deeply, honestly, what are you still afraid to be seen as? Too angry? Too sexual? Too selfish? Too intense? Too powerful? These are the shadows you must reclaim, because the final trial is about visibility, not performance, but authentic exposure. Can you be fully seen, flaws and all, and still stand in your truth? Can you let the world see your scars and not flinch? Because when you can, you become undeniable. You don't become a master by knowing more. You become a master by being more honest with yourself, with your path, with the world. You stop pretending to be healed and start living as someone who is healing in real time. You stop using spiritual language as a shield and start speaking in raw, grounded truth. And in that space right there, you become a mirror, a guide, a force. Not because you say so, because you are so. The final trial teaches you one last thing: you were never here to escape the world. You were here to remake it from the inside out, not as a savior, as a seeder, a sower of frequencies, a living embodiment of what happens when shadow and spirit learn to dance instead of fight. You survived the fire. You stared into the abyss. You faced the mirror. And now you rise. Not in light alone, not in darkness alone, but in the sacred fusion of both. This is the mark of the real chosen ones. Not the ones who claim the title, but the ones who earned it in silence, in blood, in shadow, in truth. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be true. You are not here to be safe. You are here to be sovereign. You are not here to be saved. You are here to remember that you are the one your soul has been waiting for. Now, walk.